What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central Podcast, episode number 84. As the New York Mets drop a series to one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball, we are going to discuss it. And, once again, it's just kind of going in circles with what we've been talking about over the course of this season, especially the past month and a half. It has just been terrible baseball played by this team. And it continued, unfortunately, after coming off a series win where you thought maybe, okay, you play a bad team, win some games there, and maybe you take off from there and let's see what happens. But they end up not doing that. Now they go to the House of Horrors, known to Atlanta, which we'll talk about that as well. And amongst other things that we'll get into throughout this episode, as there is a lot to talk about. As always, before we jump in everything, I ask that you please leave a like on your way into the show, or if you're watching on replay, subscribe. If you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans, turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. And if you are in the live chat, we will get to your comments and everything throughout the episode. But yeah, just another series where it looked like more the same. Where is this team just not as good as we thought? Because you should be beating up on the Washington Nationals, who have 50 wins on the year, if you have World Series aspirations. And not only did they, you know, lose these games, they just played uninspiring ball in the two losses, especially, whether it was the continuation of mental errors in the field with the likes of Pete Alonso, who just doesn't take the simple out at first base when it's a two-run ball game, whether it's the likes of Juan Soto, who just was not putting together good at bats. And once again, this team just looks lost at the plate, especially with runners at scoring position, or the biggest flaw that this offense has had all year, which is not being able to hit bullpens. And, it's one thing, and we talk about it all the time, where, they'll hit off of bad relievers against some teams. And it's like, okay, that's great, but hit against the good relievers, please. They couldn't even do that this series. Even in the win, they couldn't hit off of the Washington Nationals bullpen enough. They scored 2 runs against that bullpen. That is a problem for a team that has World Series aspirations, allegedly. And, once again, we kind of got proven our point as to why we've been making the claim the past few episodes that this is likely not a World Series team. We pray that we're wrong, but it's just the little things that this team cannot get down pat, where it's like this team just does not have it. But Matt, I'll let you jump in, as you were at, unfortunately, 2 of the losses. Fortunately, a good ballpark, but unfortunate that you had to endure both these losses, especially watching Ryan Stanek pitch.
Yeah, I'm currently live for anyone wondering. I'm live from a hotel in Washington D.C. As like Evan said, I was at Game 2 and Game 3 of the series. Of course, I go to 2 out of these 3 games, and of course, the 2 that I go to are the losses instead of going to the first game, which the Mets ended up winning 8-1. But yeah, listen, it's another reason, and again, this backs up our statement of what we were talking about on the last podcast, where we said it's like because if you guys recall, there was a ton of talk after the Mets beat the Mariners, where they took 2 out of 3 in that series, and people were asking questions. Oh, are the Mets back? Are the Mets getting back on tracks? And other people are like, see, this is why the Mets are a World Series team, because they have the talent. But I'm like you guys got to slow your temper down a little bit, because again, we've seen this team play 2.5 months of bad baseball. Like, that's not a bad stretch. That's firming and basically proving to us that this is this team's identity. So it's like, okay, sure, could have maybe been a turning point, but I always said, and you always say it, we have to see a bigger sample size before we can come to any conclusion that this team is finally turning it around and playing good baseball. And also, like, if you guys recall, we talked about this last podcast as well. And this goes hand in hand with in June, after the Mets split with the Braves. We said going into Pittsburgh and going to this series that those are both opportunities in 2 series where you can build on momentum, because the Pirates, again, one of the worst teams in baseball this year, and the Nationals, yes, they do have young talent like James Wood, like C.J. Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, teams like that, but they have not been a good baseball team either this year. And what happens in both of those series? Mets go to Pittsburgh, get swept and embarrassed. And then this series, they head down to Washington. Cool. First game was awesome. David Pearson pitches a hell of a game, and the offense is clicking on all cylinders. Chet McNeil's a big game. Brett Beatty, he had a big series in Washington with a couple home runs. Francisco Lindor, again, he had another good series. Juan Soto ends up hitting another solo home run. And it's like, okay, you win that first game, you feel good. And the other key thing, because, one of the biggest things we've been complaining about this team over the last couple months is your starters are not going deep enough. And like they talk about with David Pearson goes out there and gives you 8 innings of excellent baseball. And one of the great factors about that was because you just came off an off day, and now you win that first game. Pearson gives you 8 innings. You only use Ryan Stanek to complete the 9th inning, and now you're looking at these next 2 games, and you're like, wow, it's like we beat up on this poor Nationals team. We got 2 more games. We pretty much have a fully rested bullpen because most of the top guys did not pitch for 2 straight days, and you're looking at this like, wow, this is a serious opportunity now to gain some momentum. And then they go into the second game, and again, like, sure, the offense made it close, but again, late games. What have we been talking about this entire, majority of the last 2 months? This team does not know how to rally. They don't know how to, they know how to cut leads, but they can't seem to complete the comeback whatsoever. And listen, Senga, okay, he had a bad game. I get that, but still, the Mets offense against this Nationals bullpen should be doing a hell of a lot better than what they showed in this series. Because I believe, and I saw some stat, and I think I'm close on it, but I saw something that said that the Mets were, I believe, 5 for 33 or 5 for 38 against the Nationals bullpen this series. It's not good enough. That is absolutely not good enough for a team with supposedly, World Series aspirations. And I put my hands in quotation marks because this team doesn't look anywhere near World Series contenders being nice. They don't even look like a playoff team right now. So let's not even go into World Series contention. And then again, yesterday's game, cool. You go up early 3-0. Lindor with the home run, with the leadoff home run. Marte ends up tacking on a home run. Hayden Sanger, he comes in, gets his first MLB RBI. So congrats to him. And you're up 3-0, and Sean Manaea, he's cruising along for the first couple innings, and then one bad mental mistake by Pete Alonso, and right away, everything unfolds. Manaea ends up struggling the last couple innings. And then, the bullpen kind of, Rogers was not great. But again, I don't really want to blame the game too much on him. And then, I texted right in the group chat right away. I'm like, when they got to the 9th inning and I saw Stanek warming up, I'm like, we're either losing this game in 2 ways. Either Stanek comes in and implodes, or he keeps it close, and the Mets have their occasional tease where they try to put together a comeback, and then they end up just folding. And then what happens? The natural Stanek implosion, and then that game gets out of hand, and they lose 9-3. But then again, the offense was in the game for that entire game. They were only down 5-3 going to that 9th inning. So where is the offense beyond the I'm checking right here, beyond the 5th beyond the 5th inning or the 4th inning where they tack on the sacrifice fly. So again, it's just another series of unacceptable baseball. And again, this team is showing that. And I said it yesterday, walking out of the ballpark, I'm like, this team doesn't deserve to make the playoffs. They don't.
No.
And even if they do make the playoffs, like what? They're going to get to the wild card, maybe force it 2 games, 3 games. But again, what's the point of playing an extra 2 to 3 games of baseball when you know that you really don't have a chance? For me, I would rather miss the playoffs and actually make fundamental changes to the roster and the coaching staff than, have one of these fugazi playoff runs where, okay, maybe you win a round, but still that's maybe one of those rounds where, where you get lucky, the other team has injuries, and you just take advantage of the other team.
The bare minimum anyway going into the year to win
it was the bare minimum for us this year was either going back to the NLCS or winning the World Series. So, getting to the wild card or just the NLDS, that was not even acceptable for us going into this year. And now the fact that, they're potentially not going to make the playoffs, and looking at their upcoming schedule in September, it's not pretty. They have a lot of tough games in September. And, now they're heading to Atlanta. Yeah, Atlanta's bad, but we know how this team plays in that ballpark. Then they got to play the Phillies next week. and the Phillies right now are on a roll. So that doesn't look good. So they're in a tough spot right now. They are. This was their chance to build some momentum, like we talked about, and they completely just threw it out of the window.
which is something that they've done all year long. It's been the problem all year long. And how many times earlier in the season, even when they were winning these games, we were saying the constant theme was urinating all over themselves. Like that's just who they were early on. And, now it's finally catching up to them. And I don't want to sit here and be the guy that's like, oh, I told you so and everything. But this is why we talked about, in April and May, like, okay, it's good that they're winning, but things have to change and things have to clean up or you're not going to sustain this. And since April 30th, I have it right in front of me. They have a 46-51 record now. That is unacceptable for a team. And, forget about what you were saying with, the bare minimum was first, second round. Like, I would think that you should, at the very least, if you're playing, which going into the year, I want nothing to do with the wild card, but at the very least, my expectation was, okay, you're in the wild card because the Phillies were just slightly better than you, and you tip your cap. You are in a dogfight with the Reds. We are hate watching the Reds against the Angels. That's sickening to think about, that this is where we're at right now, that we have to sit here and root against the Cincinnati Reds, who are making a quarter of the amount of money that this roster is making. Juan Soto is going to lap their owner in financials by the time he hangs up the cleats. Like that's where we are at right now, though, with this baseball team. And it's truly embarrassing. So forget about anything. Even if they make the playoffs, changes have to be made regardless, because you cannot tell me that being slightly better than the Reds is good enough. Absolutely no way in hell. And this has been the problem, though. It's like, I don't understand what more needs to be seen for changes to be made. What is the 3-game winning streak good enough to be like, oh, that's what we are? Because I can tell you right now, if that's what the mentality is, like I said yesterday in the post game, that 3-game winning streak is an outlier of what has been going on and an outlier from the norm. If this team even makes it to October, it's just going to feel like 2022 all over again, where you have no expectations. And if anything, I feel worse going into this because, again, the bare minimum should have been to, at worst, be in a wild card series because of the fact that the Phillies just beat you out for the division. But going into the year, I wanted the division. I didn't want any part of a wild card round. And now we're sitting here in a spot that didn't exist a couple seasons ago. We're in a playoff spot that the Cincinnati Reds and even the St. Louis Cardinals have a chance of chasing. It is absolutely wild that this is where we are for a team that had, again, supposedly World Series aspirations. But it's like you said, Matt, that just the slightest bit of adversity that comes their way, they fold. And you saw it in that game when Pete Alonso made that mistake. It let them unravel, and that has happened how many times this year? How many times have we sat here and broke down games where we talk about either a loss or just a mental mistake in a game that spiraled into a loss/losing streak? I feel like we've talked about this countless times. You need to be mentally stronger than that to win a chip. There's only so much talent's going to do for you. And it's just that simple. So they could continue to say the whole talent thing, and all I'll continue to say is what I've been saying. Stick it up your ass, because I don't care. One series win this entire month of August and it's almost over. You should be ashamed. Because this, like, even if they were playing 25% of better baseball, just winning 25% of games, they are probably looking at earning themselves a bye right now. But instead, it's sub 500 ball. It's not being able to beat the Washington Nationals, who had 50 wins going into the series. And that's just embarrassing.
But again, like, even I point to this because people make comparisons between this year's team and last year's team. And don't get me wrong, last year's team was a lot better, just in terms of actually how they played baseball. But we bring it up all the time where this Mets team is losing series to the bad teams like the Pirates I brought up, and then most recently this National Series. But let's not forget that while last year was great, and they made the run to the NLCS and it was great, let's not forget that one of the biggest knacks against last year's team as well was they played down the competition against poor teams. It happened multiple times last year, where they lost a series to the A's, even earlier on, because I believe, they were barely scraping out wins against the Pirates, against the Rockies. So, like I said, while last year's team was good, this is still a trend of this team where, and even like not so much where they play up the competition now because, they're really not playing good baseball at all. And I know they just beat the Mariners, but that's more of an outlier sample than, actual like evidence to show that they're capable of playing up the competition. But again, the poor, what's it called? The poor thing of playing down the competition, it's still hurting this team and it's still haunting this team. And another thing, like, we keep talking about the talent and, it's like, with the whole Gerard Gallant thing, it's like, talent's not everything. And it is true because, and again, you need talent to be able to win games and win a championship. But like I always say, you need a strong mentality. Mistakes happen, bad games going to happen, but you can't let that one bad mistake, that one bad play, that one bad game affect you mentally. And then, you go off the ropes completely. Like that cannot happen. Like sometimes you have to say, look, that sucks. I can't make that mistake again, but you know what? Put it past me. I'm a better player than that. Let me go make up for it. This team really doesn't do that because, again, we've seen multiple times where they have one bad loss and then 6-game losing streak follows, or they'll make one bad mistake in the field and then they give up 5-6 runs. Either in that inning or then the previous innings coming up, and and then even again with that, that's also a coaching issue because we need to have a big discussion with the coaching. Because listen, I've tried to give Mendoza the benefit of the doubt. Listen, I'm a guy that, again, and as you all know, like I like to give people time to show what they can fully do. Like I don't want to be overreactionary over a small sample size or a small sample size of mistakes, but it's gotten to a point, and obviously you guys know we have the issues with Eric Chavez, Jeremy Barnes, Mike Sarba, guys like that. We understand
Hafner
those
a bit even too right now.
Hafner a bit too because his mistakes and his flaws have started to show as well with the pitching staff over the last couple of months. But it's gotten to a point where Carlos Mendoza, it's like, and again, I understand that he's not the one going out there and playing the game. He's not the one making the mistakes. He's not the one pitching. But it's gotten to a point where it's like, I'm not sure if Mendoza can manage in tight situations. I just can't, because we even saw it in the playoffs last year. Like how many times in the NLCS specifically did Mendoza make a couple wrong decisions with either the bullpen or a couple lineup decisions in the NLCS, which ended up costing the Mets. It happened a couple times, and then again this year. And listen, like I said, like I keep bringing up with the bullpen, I get that he's not the one going out there and making those pitches, but it's all about bringing the right guys in the right situations. Like you bring up multiple times in the series. Like when you look at Tyler Rogers' stats with guys on base and then with guys when there's no one on base. Tyler Rogers is a much better pitcher when guys aren't on base compared to when guys are on base. So then tell me why in this series multiple times, because it happened in game 2 and game 3. Game 2, I don't have a problem with it that much because, there was only a runner on first base. So, you could kind of get around that. It's more game 3 where I have the issue where you're bringing Tyler Rogers with runners on second and third base. And then, one base hit to the outfield and boom, 2-run score. And then all of a sudden it feels like the game is out of reach, completely because this offense is just incapable of putting together, long stretches and long runs of consistent offense. And then again, like I look at yesterday, you're going into the 9th inning, down 5-3. And yes, I know the offense has not been good. Why are you bringing in Ryan Stanek to a 2-run game? We've seen it multiple times this year that Ryan Stanek cannot pitch under any kind of stress or adversity or any high leverage situation. So tell me, why does Carlos Mendoza keep going back to this guy in these situations? And again, Ryan Helsley, and again, I know Halsey hasn't been great since the Mets acquired him, but the Mets acquired him to pitch big innings, so he's going to have to pitch regardless. So he didn't pitch this entire series. Neither did Edwin Diaz. Why are you trying to be cute with the bullpen, especially with the guy that who he has shown he hasn't been able to get outs in high leverage spots? Really, that's not even a high leverage because he's only down by 2 runs. I'm only asking you to keep the game close. And he goes out there and implodes. And again, it's not like a situation with Stanek where it's like, okay, like Stanek has been good this year, and it was just one bad blip. Because if that's the case, I still wouldn't have agreed with the situation. But at least you could say, okay, listen, it's a bad blip. It happens. It's one game. But when Stanek has shown you time after time after time that he can't pitch in those spots, why does Carlos Mendoza think he can keep coming back in those same spots? Like, it's just the unawareness of knowing how your players react in certain situations, and knowing that they'll perform well in these spots, and then not knowing when they won't perform in these certain spots. It's like Mendoza is like he has so much naivety. And again, like I brought this up, when we were at a game I believe it was a month ago against the Brewers, and I talked about it with you. It's like the mistakes that Mendoza is making this year should have been the mistakes he was making last year. And I know last year in the regular season, he still made some questionable decisions with the bullpen, but it wasn't as bad as to where we're seeing it with this year. So the fact that he's looking this worse in the second season compared to the first year, I don't have much confidence in Mendoza. And I mean, look, maybe the Mets keep him next year, but I'm telling you right now, if the Mets bring him back for next year, he better have some sort of a short leash. And I know Stearns doesn't like to do midseason firings because of all the rumors that we heard in Milwaukee. He doesn't like to do that. But you know what? There needs to be serious discussions about whether Mendoza deserves to keep his job or not, because right now it's not looking good for him.
And I want to give you some other gripes that I had with him throughout this series. So, number one, and it's happening again tonight. Why are you? I just don't understand why they're opting to put Cedric Mullins in center field and Tyrone Taylor in left field. Why would you not maximize the one thing Tyrone Taylor is here for? I mean, he's here for 2 things at this point: his defense and his base running. And they have been minimizing both now because you didn't send him in that Cleveland game. And then defensively, now you're putting him out in left field. I don't care if Cedric Mullins is not as comfortable in the corners. He's going to have to get over it because I want Tyrone Taylor's elite defense in center over Cedric Mullins, who is average, playing the most premier position in the sport, or one of the most premier positions. My other gripe with Mendoza this series, and Evan Roberts brought this up on his show on the Rico Bronya, and I'm going to relay the point because I had the same thought during the game. So, Luis Torrens is up with the bases loaded in game number 2 in the 6th inning. You don't have to be the smartest baseball fan to piece this one together. Ronnie Mauricio is good against right-handed pitching. What do the Nationals have a lot of in their bullpen? Left-handed pitchers. You know what they didn't have on the mound in the 6th inning there? They didn't have a left-handed pitcher on the mound. So why would you not go to Ronnie Mauricio in that spot to pinch hit? Because either way, if you're going to save your bench for later, what are you saving it for? Because if you're not comfortable enough putting Mauricio in against a lefty, then he's out of the question. Tyrone Taylor can't hit a lick. Marte already came in for Brandon Nimmo in this game. And then your other option was Hayden Senger. So why are you waiting around in this game to go to your bench there? It just makes absolutely no sense. And then there was a spot too, I believe it was in yesterday's game, the 3rd game, where Hayden Senger needs, and I am very anti-bunt. You guys know that if you've been listening to the show long enough. I am very anti-bunt. I'm sorry, but was it that 3rd game or was it a different game where was it Torrens that should have been bunting? I'm blanking on the situation right now. But
well, which one? Because Sanger only played yesterday's game, and he came up with the bases loaded in that fourth inning. He ended up hitting the sacrifice fly. I don't recall any other time he came up really with bases because pretty much after that fourth inning, the offense just went dead silent after that. Or maybe the only other time I could maybe see if I think it was maybe the fifth or the sixth inning where because Mackenzie Gore came out in the fifth inning and he had back-to-back walks to Marte and Pete Alonso. So I don't know if maybe that came up later in that inning, but yeah, because I can't really recall off the top of my head right now.
Regardless, though, there was a situation for a bunt, and he didn't bunt. Then, on top of this, like just to tie a bow on the entire conversation with Mendoza, um, third game, Torrens was up in the ninth, Mullins up first, it did bunt. That's what it was. Okay, yeah. So I had it mixed up there, but either way, yeah, ground into the double play. That's right.
On the third,
not the third game.
You mean the first game? Well, the first game was a whole nother thing, and I mean we'll get to that, but
yeah, I mean, either way though, it's just like these little things, and then to tie a bow, like I was saying on the Mendoza thing, there's got to be something to be said about the fact that these guys are folding as much as they are, and he doesn't seem to have control of the room. Like that's a conversation that we're not talking about enough because last year. I know we all forget it because they went to the NLCS, but the start of that season was so ugly. And what have we talked about ad nauseum from the hitting coach side too? That once you had guys like JD Martinez walk into that room, things changed. Things changed because you had some sort of leadership in that room. And if you're telling me that JD Martinez was the one that was holding this team together and everything, then this manager's not cut out for the job. And he's got to go. He's got to go because I'm so tired of seeing this from this team where they just don't look bought in. They don't look mentally strong enough. And again, like you said, it is not fully on him. The players have to perform. But someone needs to be holding the room together in some degree. And that falls on the players too, because where's the leadership? Remember all this talk about, Lindor for captain? I have not seen anything to tell me he's captain material at all this season. That you could chuck out of the window. But I tried as well, like you did, to give Mendoza the benefit of the doubt because I'm tired of seeing the constant manager changes. I am. And I get that I'm never going to be fully satisfied with a manager. But when there are things not only just on the field, but seems off the field too, that's where I question if this guy's cut out for the job. And then, I mean, again, with the player situation, it feels like he doesn't know his own players. Like, it feels like reverse splits is just a foreign language to him. Because why is it, and this is another problem, this you could fault to roster construction, not fully on Stearns because Epler's the one that signed guys like Marte and McNeil. But in yesterday's game and even tonight's game, if McNeil's good enough to hit, I'm sorry, Starling Marte is going to have to suck it up and play left field for a bit because this team needs to maximize their offense more than anything right now. Put McNeil in as the DH, which he should have been yesterday against Mackenzie Gore with the numbers he has against him. And Marte needs to play left field every now and then. Giancarlo Stanton's playing right field for the Yankees. So why can't Starling Marte play some left field for the Mets? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's another thing. Mullins has absolutely no arm whatsoever. That guy has a noodle. I saw him make multiple throws yesterday, sacrifice flies. That guy has no arm in center field. I mean, he plays a decent center field. He's no butcher. I understand that. He has good range and stuff, but the guy has no arm in center field. Look, and again, this is just to back up the point of the manager. Look, no coach, no manager is ever going to be 100% perfect with their decisions. People are going to get stuff wrong. It happens. These guys are not robots at the end of the day. Sometimes you just make bad decisions. It happens. My problem with certain managers, coaches, and with Mendoza specifically is, okay, if you make the mistake, okay, fine, you make a mistake, happens. Learn from the mistake. my biggest issue with Mendoza is he makes the same mistakes, like time after time after time. It's like, where is the learning curve? Because like I said, fine, you make mistakes, cool, happens. Just don't do it again. But he, like I said, and the thing with the Static one, why do you keep putting Ryan Static in these same situations when you know most of the time he's going to implode? And it happened yesterday. And then again, with certain lineup constructions and then putting people in certain positions, it's like listen, I don't know if maybe he doesn't have the baseball smarts or whether it's just he can't manage under pressure, which either way, if both things are true or even one of those things are true, then he's not cut out to do this job. Because every year from now until, whenever, under the Steve Cohen regime, it's going to be World Series expectations every year. So if you can't manage it now, especially when this game was 21 games over 500, then I'm sorry, I don't trust you to manage, a bullpen or the team in the playoffs. It's just, it's not going to happen. And then, two other points with the whole coaching staff. And again, this is more Mendoza specifically, but in that second game, after the Mets had that mini rally in the top of the sixth, Pete Alonso ends up hitting that double. McNeil ends up hitting that double to make the game 5-4. And again, I know you could kind of feel you can maybe blame some of the offense again for because they still had the bases loaded for not coming through. But you know what I say? Cool. And even I said this at the time of the ballpark. I'm like, you're down 5-1, get at least 3 runs here, cut the lead down to 5-4. Still plenty of ball game left. Was I a little bit annoyed that the offense couldn't come through? Yes, but at the same time, I'm like, cool. So there's still plenty of ball games. There's still plenty of ball game left. Just make the game close, and they did. But as they were going through that inning, I was looking at the bullpen because I had a clear view of the Mets bullpen, and I saw no one warming up. And considering, because the last half inning, Senga ended up hanging a meatball cutter to Josh Bell. He ended up making the game 5-1, and I'm like, bro, you cannot bring this guy out for the 6th inning. And again, I know it didn't come back to hurt them because, Senga ends up giving up the leadoff hit, and then Rogers comes in and ends up retiring the side. But I'm like, with how poorly Senga pitched in the 4th and the 5th inning, because I know he gave up 2 runs in the 3rd inning, but I don't want to really blame Senga too much for the 3rd inning just because he made a couple pitches. He did get screwed though with the catcher's interference, and then there was that ground ball. He made the pitch to C.J. Abrams. It's just Abrams put it in the right spot, and he was able to beat it out with the speed. But after the 4th and 5th inning, where he was just getting crushed because he let up 3 extra base hits, let up 2 runs in that 4th inning, and then gives up the cutter, the cutter home run to Josh Bell. And like I said, when the Mets had that big inning in the 6th, I'm like, you can't bring this guy out for the 6th or for the bottom of the 6th. I know he had a low pitch count at the time, but situationally, you can't do it. Especially again with the fact that most of the top guys in the bullpen just had 2 days off because you had the off day, and then Peterson went 8 innings. I'm like, be aggressive, go to your bullpen. And like I said, it didn't come back to hurt them, but I did not agree with that decision whatsoever. And then the top of the 9th inning, because Beatty ends up grounding out, Mullins ends up hitting a single. So first base, 1 out. And I texted in the group chat. I'm like, you got to send Cedric Mullins in. You got to send Cedric Mullins here. And I believe Torrens got to a 2-0 count. They didn't send them. And then, boom, Torrens ends up hitting into a ground ball double play. Which, listen, Torrens, for me, shouldn't be swinging the bat at that point. Like if anything, lay down a bunt at that point, but just don't swing just to avoid the double play. But even with Torrens swinging, if you send Mullins there and Torrens ends up hitting the same ground ball, Mullins has enough speed to end up beating out the play to second base. So the ball game still continues, and now you have the top of the order with Lindor leading off, and we all know that Lindor's been on a scorcher these last couple games. It's just, again, situationally, it's like you have a guy on base with speed. Why are you not sending him? And again, this goes back to I forgot which game it was a couple weeks ago with when you had Alvarez lead off, I believe, extra or the bottom of the 9th inning, and you had Tyrone Taylor coming to pinch run, and then again you don't send them, and then what's it called? They don't end up sending him around third base, and the Mets end up losing that game. Again, it's poor situational, just things all around from players and coaching staff respectively.
That was the moment, the double play that I was referring to. And what I want in that situation, not only to send Mullins, but try to get aggressive, get Mullins over to second base, then lay down the bunt. You have a runner on third with 1 out and Lindor coming up. All you need is a deep fly ball there.
Yeah.
Like that's it. But instead, no. And with that bullpen decision too, like that's another thing that we're talking about here. Like, where's the like? Does Mendoza have it up here to know his own players? We've seen time and time again with Senga, Manaya, Holmes, like every starter but Peterson hits a wall once they're at the fourth, fifth inning mark. Why are you pushing your luck going into the sixth when Rogers is coming in to begin with? The second that hits allowed, why not just start Rogers with a clean inning when both your starter hits a wall usually, and at that point, and the reliever you're going to bring in is better with the bases empty. And yesterday, with that situation, if you were wondering, oh well, because I was criticizing them bringing Rogers in with the bases loaded. Oh, who'd you want them to bring in? I don't know. Maybe use Gregory Soto, who only threw 14 pitches the previous day, because all you're asking for is one out there from Soto. And I get that, it's a crazy concept to think a lefty could get a righty out. I know that's difficult for this manager to comprehend, but you put in Soto there to get one out. Then you could start Rogers with a clean inning and work the bullpen from there. Like to me, that was just a no-brainer. But I guess that I'm just insane. And on top of this all, no team, by the way, I don't know if you saw this on Twitter. I forgot who put the tweet out, but no team has made the playoffs not having a ninth inning comeback during the regular season. So the Mets would be the first team, if they even made it to October at this rate, to do that. That's pathetic considering where we were a year ago. But I do want to get to some comments in the chat just because there is a lot.
Can I just bring up one more point with the Mullins thing? Listen,
Yeah.
even if Mullins gets thrown out there at second base, I'd rather go down losing being aggressive than being passive. Because we know one of the biggest reasons why Mullins was brought here, along with his defense, was for his base running ability and his speed. So again, why are you not utilizing that aspect of his game? Like again, like I said, listen, if Mullins attempts to steal second base and he gets thrown out, fine. It is what it is. Like I said, I'd rather go down and lose being aggressive than being passive. And being passive and relying on Luis Torrens to come through, with a clutch hit, to me, that's poor management decision from Mendoza.
And that also made me want to quickly do a bit of research here on their catcher, just to make ourselves feel worse, where their catcher, Drew Millis, I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, where he is in terms of his defensive metrics. He's high in pop time, but everything else is not that great. So I don't know, make of that what you will. But like you said, I'd rather take the chances there.
And still, even with that point, like, okay, cool, you just came off a series win, but this is a team that's desperate for wins. Like, you have to be aggressive. You have to push the point. The Nationals are not a good team. Like, again, it's a whole lot of fundamental issues with this team, because yes, they do have talent to a certain point of view. Not as much talent as maybe we thought initially coming into the year. But I feel like the more problem with this team is just they make way too many fundamental mistakes.
Yeah, 100%. And the sad part is, even if they found a way to win this series, I wouldn't have looked at anything special, because they're in a dogfight with this level of team. But let me get to some of the comments here. Jake saying that they could have a playoff spot today. Yes. Stanek is still here. I don't understand it either. Like I said yesterday, I mean, this team's just not serious. It's that simple. I don't understand what his role is on the team. Why are you keeping him around? Um, well, let's say this core crumbles with high expectations. Always have, always will. And this is why we're saying changes have to be made after the season. You got to make changes to the coaching staff and to this roster. I wonder if it's slightly our fault for these expectations. Last year was supposed to be a bridge year and see what we had, but they end up going above and beyond expectations to the NLCS. When you sign Juan Soto, this is what comes with the expectations, on top of making the NLCS. And that's where people have their criticism with criticism with Stearns right now, and I'm not fully there. I still think that some things I blame him for some things, but not for others. I don't blame him for the fact that he inherited a lot of Billy Epler's mess because it's not his fault that Starling Marte's here eating up all that money to do nothing outside of get the occasional home run here and there. I don't blame him for Jeff McNeil making all that money while not having like a defined role. I don't blame him for a lot of this stuff. Like he's done a great job building the farm system, but I get the concern and I get the criticism of, people are pissed off with what he did after signing Soto, which looks fair right now. I mean, none of these offseason moves have looked great, but the biggest criticism Matt and I both share is that Eric Chavez at the very least needed to go a while ago, and that's something that's problematic.
Yeah, and again, this just goes back to the fact because again, we've heard the rumors that Stearns doesn't like to make mid-season firings, which to me doesn't make any sense because, and listen, like I brought up before, it's not all the time that just because you make a mid-season firing that it's gonna push the team momentum forward. For me, it's just more the fact that someone should be held accountable for this mess. Like, and the thing, the biggest problem for me is because okay, fine because I've said multiple times, even if they fire Chavez or somebody, I think it's too late in the season to see any kind of effect. For me, though, if any of these guys are back next year, then you start seeing some concerns in Stearns. And I hope because even I saw this tweet a couple weeks ago. Let me just bring it up for you guys and read it out loud. But it's just the difference in terms of this comes from Ernest Dove, who does a great stuff in terms of Mets prospect stuff and minor league stuff. But he said this was the tweet: grain of salt Mets info incoming. When Stearns took over, he immediately implemented changes to hitters' approaches throughout the minor leagues, from AAA to DSL. Focus on power, doing damage, exit velo, barrels, line drives. And then, when you, okay, and then this was more stats. DSL Orange lineup today: 5 bats over 800 plus OPS, 3 bats over 900, 1 bat at 792. I'm sorry, but I look at the attributes of power, damage, exit velo, barrels, line drives. None of those overlap into Eric Chavez's philosophy. So, and again, this goes back to the fact which I just don't get why Chavez is still here, considering that he wasn't Stearns' hire. He wasn't Stearns' hire. Epler brought him in 2022, so it just doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't look at the fact that this team made it to the NLCS last year and say that that's the main factor of why Chavez is back. Because again, we saw the concerns in the hitting approach last year and how it hurt them in the NLCS. And now, basically all those concerns are, are hurting this team again, and even more to a fuller effect than what we saw last year. So for me, fine, you don't get rid of them now because I think it's too late. But both of these guys better be gone next year. Because like I said, if not, then I have serious concerns. But just from reading the fact and that Stearns made that much of a change to the hitting approach down in the minor leagues, I have to at least expect that these two guys will be gone because then if they're not, then the whole approach thing just doesn't make sense from minor leagues to major leagues because both the habits should be the same throughout the minor leagues and the major leagues. So I at least expect them to be gone. I hope they're gone, but if not, then we have problems.
Yeah, that's really the biggest thing that's going to make or break how I feel about Stearns this offseason. If those two aren't gone, I'm going to be very angry with Stearns because it's long overdue. And this is why the prospects fail. And this is why if, Carson Bench, who I expect to tear it up in AAA, gets called up next year, or if he gets if he's on the opening day roster to start next year and Chavez is still here, and all of a sudden Bench isn't playing as good baseball, well, we could pretty much connect the dots there very easily. And we talk about this all the time with hockey, with every sport. You want to have your farm system very similar to how your pro team is, so it's easier to acclimate. I mean, we talk about this all the time with Statboy Steven with the Rangers, how, the reason that teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning are so successful is the seamless transition from Syracuse to the pro level is it's just perfect. It's a perfect transition. You want to have that. And I don't understand why David Stearns is so reluctant to just make the change that he needs to, where you could have that seamless transition for these players from the minor leagues to the big leagues, because then you could actually start to get aggressive with your prospects on top of that. It like that's my biggest criticism above all. And I get that people are, not happy with the starting pitching like Sean Manaea right now. And I agree, Sean Manaea should be going more than 5 innings. And he also needs to expand his arsenal. But I also think he's not healthy and he needs to just sit down and get surgery. That's a whole different conversation. But, you want to talk about the pitching. Okay. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to bat 1,000 on every signing. I don't expect any general manager to. But I can tell you right now, when it is clear that the hitting coach is a problem, and Carson actually, I think, put out a tweet too of the Mets numbers when they pull the ball versus when they hit it to center field versus opposite field. A crazy concept, I know, but when they're pulling the ball, that's when they're putting up their best numbers. Because people are going to sit here and be like, oh, well, they don't have to listen to the hitting coaches and hit to the opposite field. Number one, you're most likely going to do what your coaches tell you. Number two, you're not going to always do it. And what do you know? When they're not doing it, they're finding themselves more successful. I don't know what more needs to be seen here. And that's why, again, if they don't make a change at the hitting coach position after the season, David Stearns definitely deserves a lot of criticism at that point.
Yeah, I mean, even like you just brought up the Carson tweet that he pulled out that they put up, because I just pulled it up. So this is the tweet. So 2025 Mets when they pull the baseball. Again, I know, crazy concept, but here it is: 307 isolated power, 977 OPS, 171 WRC plus. When they pull or when they use center field, 167 ISO. So big drop from 307, 814 OPS. Again, big drop from 977, and then 124 WRC plus. Big drop from 171. 2025 Mets when they use opposite field, 132 isolated power, 307 to 132, big drop off. OPS down from 977 to 774, and then WRC plus down from 171 to 111. It's not a coincidence when you're coached poorly and you're telling your players to not maximize your skill and ability, you're going to end up with worse stats and you're going to end up losing more ball games. Like this is not rocket science. This is not trick questions, trick equations. When you set your team up to fail and set your team to minimize their strength and abilities, yeah, you're going to lose more games. It's simple as that.
Yeah, and it's also the thing where, when you're telling them to intentionally swing late, again, you're going to listen to your coach. You're going to listen to your coach. That's just how it is. And again, I get that they could ignore them, and that's where the players do deserve some criticism as well. But at the end of the day, more times than not, you do what your coach says. I mean, we've all been there. I'm sure all of us have played a sport to some degree, and we don't like what our coach has said, or where, I certainly didn't like where my coach batted me in the lineup at points, and I'm not a professional player. But you know what I do? I go out there and actually try to execute. It's simple as that. And again, I've disagreed where I've been placed in, when I've played hockey too. I've disagreed where I've been put in the lineup at points. But you got to listen to your coach. It's just that simple. So let me see what else there is. And I get it with the starting pitching. I get that they're not getting enough starting pitching. But you also have to realize too, and you could critique Stearns for the guys that he signed, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you he doesn't deserve criticism for the Frankie Montas signing in particular. I could tell you that for free. I did not, and even the Clay Holmes one, I sold myself on it, but I was very skeptical about it. I was very much of the train where like, okay, go get Nick Pavetta. Like that was the guy we both really, really wanted. So you can criticize the guys, but at the same time, you have to realize this team did not have enough pitching in house already outside of David Peterson to where you could sit there and sign an ace and then you already have the rest of the rotation filled out. Maybe by 2027, when Scooble hits the market, okay, maybe they could go out there and get him because you're going to have McLean, Sproat, Tong, Scott, all these other starters start to fill in. Peterson, I think, still has control at that point. You're going to have all these guys on cheap contracts filling out the rotation to where you could spend that money to go out and get a Scooble. But the problem is with the way the roster is constructed, which again, this falls on Epler. He left this team with nothing. There was nothing here for Stearns to do. He had to go out there and sign multiple guys to fill the rotation. That's why you can't just go out there and overpay an ace like everyone wants them to do, because what about the rest of the rotation? You know, if they went out there and signed Max Fried, who hasn't been great over the past month or two either way, but they go out and get Max Fried, okay, what about the rest of the rotation? What do you do there?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why for me, and we said it multiple times during the offseason, while it would have been nice to add that, that big name, because, who doesn't like to go out and, and add a big time free agent to their team? Especially here in New York, where, both teams, Mets and Yankees, we're supposed to have the big stars because we know we're the big market and we could shell out the most money aside from the LA Dodgers. But, when you looked at the situation again, where it's like, okay, and again, I know the Dodgers can do it, where they go out and they build the super rotation, but the Dodgers have built up so much pitching depth throughout the last decade, where they can go out and they can afford to go out and go and trade for Tyler Glass now, give him a big time extension, go out there and sign Blake Snell to a big time deal. They can do that. The Mets not so much, and even then, if the Mets. If let's just say for example, right, the Mets went out this offseason, they signed Corbin Burns. Cool, fine. Corbin Burns ended up needing to get Tommy John surgery anyway. So you would have been down a big time pitcher already, and you would have had so much money already tied to him, and then for more years to come. Which I know Tommy John surgery isn't necessarily an inning ending injury now. Even the fact that more pitchers actually look better after they come back from Tommy John surgery. But again, when you commit that much money to pitchers, you don't want that type of injury in their first year of that contract. And then fine. Listen, Max Fried would have been a nice signing, but even then, he's had injury concerns. And I still think, while he's had a good year this year, and I think the first couple of years of that contract is going to look good, I don't think the back end of that contract is going to look good.
He's going to need Tommy John at some point too.
Yeah. And then even with Blake Snell, Snell over the last couple of years has even dealt with, injuries himself. And still, he's had the concerns where he necessarily over the last couple of years hasn't gone deep into games either. So really, where would we have been left with this rotation? And then especially considering, you look at this year, Canning went down, Senga missed some time. Montas, I know he hasn't been good, but still, he missed half the season. So, and then, you miss a couple of injuries, to certain relievers, and and pretty much that piggybacks of everything else. So to me, I don't think it was necessarily smart to go out there and shell all the money. I mean, for me, the guy I would have done it for, because, and again, it's paying off of the Red Sox, I would have went out there and I would have traded for Garrett Crochet. But again, Crochet is 25 years old and he just signed a 7-year extension. So again, that only takes him to about 32 years old. So for me, I would have done that, but the Mets simply just didn't have the prospect farm to beat out the Red Sox, and which listen, it happens. The Mets and Stearns are doing a good job now of building up their farm system. So hopefully now they'll be able to pull off more trades like that and get guys early before they end up hitting the market. But again, listen, Stearns tried to be creative. He tried to maybe. Do I think he went to the well a little bit too much this offseason? Yes, because when you keep. And I know it worked last year with Severino and Minaya, but I don't think you can necessarily go, keep going to the farm of trying to hit magic on certain guys. I think it would have been more smart to go get a guy like Nick Pivetta, a guy that's been a proven starter over the last couple years, and he's had a pretty good year with the Padres. Like I said, for me, the Montas one, I tried to convince myself, but I still had my doubts on that. Clay Holmes, I think Holmes will be fine. Personally, I think as he gets more stamina over the next couple of years, and he works on improving his arsenal and utilizing more of his pitches, I think Holmes will be fine. And even with Holmes, there's at least that upside where even if he doesn't completely work out, you could still move him to the bullpen. Like Frankie Montas, there is no future in him being a bullpen arm for $17 million. I'm sorry, like I can't sell myself on that. I can't sell myself on that all completely. And then again, with the fact that he has injury concerns as well. I mean, look, the thing with Minaya, I wanted Minaya back. I'm happy they brought back Minaya, but I think it's clear that, and for me, I thought he pitched well up until the fifth inning, and still, I think the Pete error, and I know it technically wasn't an error, but it should have been. The Pete error ended up screwing him. And yes, I know he ended up hitting two guys. He ended up hitting C.J. Abrams in the fifth inning, which that you don't want to see. But he ended up making if he ended up making his pitches in that fifth inning, and Pete Alonso makes that smart play and takes the guaranteed out first base, Minaya ends up getting through that fifth inning still, with the Mets still being up 3-1. And then you could have brought in your bullpen. So for me, listen, Minaya has to be better, but I think he was much better yesterday than what that start indicated. But that's just me personally, because I thought being there, I thought his fastball looked good. He was pretty
The
much
first inning was good.
Yeah, he was sitting pretty much anywhere between 90 to 92, and he was getting a ton of swings and misses on a sweeper, and he was laying that sweeper nicely. But again, I still agree with like what you said. He has to expand his arsenal, but I still think to a certain degree that he's pitching hurt. So I think for me, he should get the surgery this offseason.
Yeah, the problem really more with Minaya is the fact that once he's at the 70 to 75 pitch mark, I mean, he's just done. Like that's really the biggest issue. And when this is a guy that you were expecting to start playoff games, that's a problem. The only, criticism where I could sit here and say, maybe it's more fair is they really should have maybe got a little more aggressive to get a starting pitcher at the deadline this year, like a Mitch Keller, just to eat innings. Like I don't need them to go out there and get some high end starter, just something to eat some innings. But I also wanted to bring this comment up because this is the point here altogether is that the Dodgers have not only the minor league depth, but also look at the way they're allocating their payroll. Because Otani deferred all that money, which helps them have more flexibility to spend. Mookie Betts is making just as much, if not just slightly more, than Starling Marte, to put in perspective how their payroll situation is. Freddie Freeman's on a sweetheart deal given the way he's playing. Will Smith is, I'm pretty sure, still under team control, basically playing there for free. So they had the luxury to go out there and spend on Yamamoto, who also wanted to be there. They had the luxury of extending Glasnow, getting Snell, where the Mets aren't there yet. And then even with the Crochet thing, which you could sit here and be like, oh, but what about Tong, McLean, or Sproat? Like, why couldn't they move any of those guys? Because the farm system's not deep enough. Like, sure, you could have done it maybe to get Crochet, but then you're leaving your system barren again, and that limits your flexibility at the deadline. And then people would get pissed off at the deadline if Stearns didn't make moves because the farm system's too barren. So this is where it just like I get some of the criticism, especially with the Chavez thing. I think that's the thing that Stearns deserves the most criticism for out of anything. But I can't sit here and say, it's all his fault when Epler left this thing with nothing, both in the prospect pool and then nothing for payroll flexibility with the major league roster. Like that, again, the money that McNeil is making, the money that Marte is making, there just wasn't enough flexibility. They, again, hypothetically, they could have used the money that they signed for with Minaya and Montas. They could have used that and then spend a little more to get an ace. But again, what about the rest of the rotation? Because you still then need another starter at that point.
Yeah, I mean, but this is why And listen, Stearns does deserve some credit. I'm not to that point where it's like I see people saying, and I know maybe it's just more Twitter overreactions, which because Twitter's just a cesspool place with people that are completely overreactionary. But Stearns doesn't deserve to get fired. But this offseason is going to be very big for him because, and again, this is one of the big reasons why I brought him here because when you have that ability to do large roster overturns, this is where he's going to get tested because he's going to have money coming off the books this year. Marte is going to be gone. Winker's going to be gone. That's like $27-28 million right there.
Stanek's another 4.5. See you later.
Yeah, Stanek, bye. Get the fuck out of here. I want nothing to do with you anymore. Listen, we even heard at the trade deadline that teams were interested in Jeff McNeil. And with the way he's played this year, maybe you could get it. Maybe you could get a team to take on that whole contract because he only has one more year left with I believe a club option after that. So maybe a team would be willing to even take that money, and that's $15 million right there. So now you're looking okay, like Stearns is gonna have over $50-something million to spend, and maybe they DFA Frankie Montas, and Cohen basically says, listen, you could reuse that $17 million. So now you're looking at just under $70 million. So Stearns going to have a lot of money to play with this offseason to try to overhaul the roster and make it, more deeper, make it maybe more younger, make it more athletic, make it more, be better in terms of intangibles and stuff like that. So let's see what he has to do. But this is going to be, Stearns is going to be under a lot of pressure this offseason because this roster, it needs quite a bit of an overhaul.
I think even with the Montas thing, like you could probably pay him down and get a team to take him this offseason because teams get desperate for starting pitching. Maybe that's an option too. And again, that opens just even more payroll flexibility as well. So, we'll see how this all unfolds and everything. But, that's offseason talk. But like either way, like you said, I mean, Stearns, I think this offseason is really the make or break type of offseason, if you will, of how much faith we should have in him or not. Because if he goes out there and spends that money smartly and fires the two hitting coaches that need to go, and I'm also of the camp where I think they should just fire Hefner at this rate, you do that and actually spend the money smartly, we'll see. But if those things don't happen, then we're going to have the conversation there. It's really that simple. And this is it. This is what the philosophy is. And I get people don't like it, but this is the truth. And again, you saw them get aggressive for Yamamoto. I would not rule out, like I said before, once 2027 rolls around, which, you're going to have a lockout. So hopefully you could get it done beforehand, a deal. But don't rule out the possibility that since all these young pitchers are coming through and Peterson's still under control, I would not rule it out them getting aggressive for a Skubal. Or maybe that the Pirates are ready to trade Paul Skeens at that point. I feel like that's more of a post-lockout deal, depending on if there's a salary cap or not by the end of that. But that's a different conversation there. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility of those things happening. And I get that people don't want to hear that now because they want to see the immediate success. And I'm right there with everyone. I believe me, I want to see immediate success, which this team should be having right now either way. But, the old saying, and I hate to say it because it's something that drives me insane with sports, but the whole Rome wasn't built in a day thing. It's the truth, though. Like, the Dodgers weren't this overnight. It's just that simple. And, you have to give this thing time before fairly criticizing him. Where the difference is with Epler, you could criticize off the rip because the Angels were the team that had him. And you could look at the track record there and say, yeah, this guy freaking stinks. And I get Epler as a Milwaukee, or not Epler, Stearns has been in Milwaukee. So people are like, oh, he's not going to spend. I'm willing to give it time to see once this payroll is flexible to see what he does.
Yeah,
I get some of the criticism, but I'm just not fully there.
Yeah, but it's also the thing, and we're always fair about this, where we always say two things can be true. You can say that the future is bright and that Rome wasn't built in a day, but you could also hold this team accountable for saying that this season is just far below the standards of what we expected, and some guys just haven't performed this year. It's simple as that. And look, Stearns, I still believe in him, I still think he was the right hire to bring in just based off what he did in Milwaukee.
And who
But
else were you bringing in?
yeah, exactly. That's the only thing. It's like okay, okay, cool. Let's say the people get what they want, right? And they fire Stearns. Who are you bringing in? Like, it's not like good baseball executives or good executives in any sport, grow on trees. Because we see how many poor executives there are, in any league, whether it be NHL, NBA, NFL, MLB. So when you get one, you have to make sure that that you make sure you're a bit patient with them, and you have to make sure you don't be a bit overreactionary, because we've seen that where it's like you can get a bit too overreactionary with somebody, and then they go on to do good things, good things elsewhere with another franchise. So listen, like I said, you can be fair with both things, where Starnes is doing a great job, with the farm system, with the fact that the Mets look like a much more deeper team in terms of that, and the future is bright. But you could also say, look, listen, he didn't have the greatest offseason this past winter, and this team has overperformed. It's simple as that.
And I think just back to the initial comment in the first place to really, you know, tie this together about the whole is it on us with the expectations? I think that their expectations were blown out of the water too, because I don't think they were expecting to make the NLCS last year. I don't think they expected to sign Juan Soto this past offseason. I truly don't think they were prepared for that. And, we'd be talking about this completely differently if both those things didn't happen, or even one of them. We'd be talking about this team in a completely different light than we are right now. But this is what happened, and that's what makes it where we are fairly criticizing the product right now, but also willing to be patient on what's to come in the future.
Yeah, because I mean, listen, this is the deepest farm system I've ever seen the Mets have. Listen, maybe on the pitching side, I mean, on the hitting side, you could say maybe it's a bit top heavy, with guys like Carson Bench, and I know Jet Williams are not necessarily the highest on, but even still, maybe he has a ceiling to be at least a decent player at the major league level. And certain guys like that, maybe Ryan Clifford eventually comes up. I don't think Clifford's going to be a superstar, but maybe he'll be a nice little, depth piece, bench bat, type DH guy where he's hitting you home runs. But then the pitching side is really where I'm looking at and being really excited, because Jonah Tong in his short time in AAA, he's looked excellent, and I get there's a jump between AAA hitting and Major League hitting, but still the fact that Jonah Tong has dominated AA and AAA for this short amount of time, I'm really excited to see him. Noel McLean, he'll be pitching tonight. He had a really good first start. Let's see how he factors today against the Braves. Christian Scott, he had Tommy John surgery this year. Let's see how he does, coming back next year. Brandon Sproat, listen, maybe his stock has, dropped a little bit from what we expected, but still, I think Sproat can come up here and, and maybe be a solid 3-4 guy in the rotation, maybe two. I don't think, he'll maybe necessarily be an ace, but, if he comes in and he could be a really good, depth pitcher, on cheap money, you take that 100%, 100% of the time. And even then, going back to the position player side, they just drafted Mitch Voigt this year out of Michigan. So he looks like an intriguing prospect, and he's getting a lot of comparisons to Carson Bench in terms of, his hitting style, his playing style. So the Mets do have a bright outlook in terms of prospect wise. So that's one of the things, like we said, that you can't, blame David Stearns on. He's done a very good job in terms of that aspect of the team.
Yeah. 100% on all of that. And, we'll be able to deep dive a lot of these conversations more in the offseason, because it looks like we might have a longer offseason than we did last year, unfortunately. But the Mets head to the House of Horrors. The weather machines are in full effect down there in Atlanta already. So who knows if tonight's going to be a rain delay, tomorrow, whenever. I don't know. Uh, there's always rain. All I could say, I'm going in, unfortunately, with low expectations. I expect them to lose the series. I think they'll take one. Uh, Prove me wrong, though, like I always say.
Yeah, yeah. If anything, best case scenario, because I could very well easily see a sweep, because again, it's the Braves and it's Truist Park, and we know that this team shits their pants. anytime they walk into that ballpark. So I could easily see a sweep. I'll say though that they take one and ultimately lose the series, but yeah, I don't really have any ton of high expectations. And but yeah, I mean, as we always say, prove us wrong. The only thing I'll bring up before we ultimately get out of here and end this episode, um, guys, if I know all you guys in here who watch us, you guys are massive baseball fans because why else would you spend your Friday evening at 6:10 p.m. watching us talk Mets baseball off a disaster series win. But if any of you guys ever come to Washington D.C., make sure you guys hit up Nationals ballpark. It's very nice ballpark. I went through the last 2 games of the series, and even Washington, nation's capital, very nice city. With all the historical monuments and stuff. I've been walking around the past 3 days with my family and stuff. So very nice experience. So if any of you guys are ever in the area, and look, even if the Mets are not playing, if the Nationals ever have a home game, I highly recommend you guys go out there because even the surrounding area of Nationals Park, it's very nice, with all the restaurants and stuff and all that stuff, a couple nice parks. So yeah, I would just say that for me, I would give Nationals Park. I know they're the division rival, but I would give that a thumbs up if I were to rate a stadium. Nationals Ballpark, very nice stadium.
The Dave Portnoy pizza reviews, the Matt stadium reviews. That's what we got now. But yeah, we talked about hitting up more road games. That's definitely a stadium that I want to hit up at some point. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. There will, of course, be a post game tonight, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.